Have you ever looked around, and even when surrounded by people, felt a profound emptiness and that nagging sensation that no one truly gets you, like you could just vanish, and no one would really notice the real you? If you've ever felt this crushing loneliness, I need to share something that will completely shift how you see it. Because the loneliness you're experiencing isn't an empty void. It's not a lack of something. It's actually something much greater trying to surface within you. Eckhart Tolle experienced this in an extreme way. Before his spiritual awakening, he lived in a state of constant anxiety and despair. He was utterly alone. No relationships, no job, no home. And it was precisely in this state of utter aloneness that something extraordinary happened. He awakened and spent the next 2 years sitting on a park bench in a state of intense joy, alone, but never lonely. This distinction between being alone and feeling lonely is fundamental to understanding what's happening to you. Being alone is an external condition. Loneliness is an internal interpretation, and that interpretation stems from a very specific place. It comes from the ego, which feels separate from everything and everyone. If you're watching this video, you're likely going through a process of transformation. And one of the most confusing aspects of this process is that it often comes hand in hand with a deep sense of loneliness. You start to feel different. The conversations that once fulfilled you now seem hollow. The people you used to connect with now feel distant, and you start to wonder, what's wrong with me? Nothing is wrong with you. What's happening is that your true self is emerging. And this true self no longer fits into the old structures. It's no longer satisfied with superficial connections. It can no longer feign interest in things that don't resonate. This might feel like a problem, but it's actually a sign of evolution. Eckhart Tolle explains that the ego constantly needs external validation to exist. It needs others to confirm who you are, to approve of your choices, to applaud your achievements. And when that validation doesn't come, the ego panics. It interprets it as loneliness, as rejection, as abandonment. But the true self needs none of that. The true self is complete in itself. It can appreciate the company of others, but doesn't depend on it to feel whole. It can be alone without feeling lonely. It can be in silence without feeling empty. This is the great revelation. The loneliness you feel isn't about others. It's about you still being partially identified with the ego. While your true self is trying to emerge, it's a tension between two parts of you, the ego that craves external connection and the true self that already is connection. Let me explain it another way. When you were a child, you probably felt connected to everything. There wasn't this sense of separation. You were one with the world. Then the ego began to form. You started to see yourself as separate, as an isolated individual in a world of other isolated individuals. And from this perception of separation, loneliness is born. Spiritual awakening is a return to that original oneness. But now consciously, it's not a regression to childhood. It's an evolution to something beyond the ego. And during this process, there's a period of transition, a period where the old no longer works, but the new isn't fully established yet. And in this period, loneliness can be intense. But here's what you need to understand. This loneliness is temporary. It's a phase. It's a portal. It's not your destination. It's a passage to something much greater. Researchers have discovered something interesting about the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is a negative experience of being alone. Solitude is a positive experience of being alone. The same external condition. Two completely different experiences. What makes the difference? The relationship you have with yourself. If you can't be at peace with yourself when you're alone, you'll seek relationships to cover up that discomfort. And those relationships will never satisfy you, because they weren't created from wholeness. They were created from neediness, and neediness attracts more neediness. Eckhart Tolle says it clearly. If you can't be comfortable with yourself when you're alone, you'll seek a relationship to cover up your unease, and that unease will reappear in another form within the relationship. This explains why so many people are in relationships and still feel lonely. Because the loneliness wasn't about a lack of company. It was about a lack of connection with oneself. And no external relationship can fill that internal void. The good news is, you can transform loneliness into solitude. You can transform emptiness into fulfillment, not by adding something from the outside, but by discovering what already exists within. Eckhart Tolle spent 2 years sitting on a park bench, alone, with nothing. And he describes that period as one of the happiest of his life. Why? Because he had discovered the source of peace that exists within every human being, a source that doesn't depend on external circumstances, that doesn't need validation, that simply is. That source exists within you too. The loneliness you feel is actually an invitation to discover it. It's a sign that the external sources of satisfaction are no longer working. And that's good, because as long as the external sources work, you'll never seek the internal source. Now let me give you something practical. Something you can start doing today to transform your experience of loneliness. The next time you feel that wave of loneliness coming on, don't try to escape it. Don't call someone. Don't open social media. Don't turn on the TV. Just stay with the feeling. Sit in silence. Close your eyes and observe. Where do you feel the loneliness in your body? Is it a weight in your chest? An emptiness in your stomach? A tension in your throat? Just observe, without trying to change anything. Now realize that you are observing the loneliness. That means you are not the loneliness. You are the one who observes. And the one who observes is not alone. The one who observes is consciousness itself. And consciousness is connected to everything. This simple exercise might seem small, but it's revolutionary because it changes your identification. Instead of being the lonely person, you become the consciousness that observes the loneliness. And from that consciousness, there is no separation. There is no isolation. There is only presence. With practice, you'll notice something surprising. The loneliness starts to transform. What was heavy becomes light. What was painful even becomes pleasant. You begin to appreciate the moments alone. You begin to value the silence. You begin to find peace in your own company. This doesn't mean you'll reject others. On the contrary, when you find peace alone, your relationships improve. Because you're no longer seeking something that's missing. You're sharing something that overflows. Relationships based on neediness are draining. Relationships based on fulfillment are nourishing. And it's only when you learn to be whole on your own that you can create truly nourishing relationships. If this video is helping you understand what's happening to you, and if you want me to continue bringing this kind of content, the super thanks is a way for you to say, "This made a difference to me." Every bit of support helps me to continue this work. Now let me tell you something that many people don't realize. The loneliness you feel during the awakening has a purpose. It's forcing you to look inside. It's removing the distractions. It's creating the space necessary for you to find yourself. Think about the great spiritual transformations in history. Jesus spent 40 days in the desert. Buddha sat alone beneath a tree. Eckhart Tolle spent 2 years on a park bench. There's something about aloneness that is essential for the awakening. When you're constantly surrounded by people and activities, there's no space for the true self to emerge. There's too much noise and too much distraction, too much external demand. Aloneness clears all of that away. It creates a void. And in that void, something new can be born. Aloneness is the womb of spiritual rebirth. It's uncomfortable. It's dark. It's tight. But it's there that new life is formed. So instead of running from aloneness, consider embracing it. Instead of seeing it as a problem, consider seeing it as an opportunity. Instead of trying to fill the void, consider exploring what's at the bottom of it. Because at the bottom of aloneness, there's no emptiness. There's you, your true self. The one that exists beyond the ego, beyond the masks, beyond the social performances. the one that simply is. And when you find that true self, the loneliness disappears. Not because you're surrounded by people, but because you realize you were never really separate, that the separation was an illusion of the ego, that you've always been part of something much larger. That's the irony of awakening. You start feeling more alone than ever, and end up realizing you were never alone, that the aloneness was just a veil covering the truth. And the truth is that you are one with everything that exists. Tell me in the comments, do you feel alone even when surrounded by people? What's that experience like for you? I want to know your story. I respond to all the comments. Remember, the loneliness you feel isn't your enemy. It's your guide. It's pointing you inward, to the only place where true connection can be found, and it not out there, but in here, in the silence, in the presence, in your true self that is finally emerging. And when it emerges completely, you'll look back and be grateful for every moment of aloneness, because that's exactly what brought you here, to yourself.